This is a response video to Nick. It's also a response video. A couple people have emailed me about some of these issues. Especially this North American Union idea. The conspiracy to consolidate South America, at least Mexico, Canada, and the United States. Presumably, eventually, all of South America, I guess, would be included. In any such union. And I guess it relates also to the 9/11 thing and everything else. I don't know how serious Nick was about that. I tend to think he doesn't buy into that theory, but I don't know. He left it sort of ambiguous, that he finds some of this information compelling. The information that's out there. I guess it relates to the anarchy thing. It relates to the Ron Paul thing, because a lot of this stuff is generated by some kind of idea that there is forces out there conspiring to control and exploit the system. And so part of me would, my first response would be well, what else is new? I mean, rich people have always tried to manipulate the system. I mean, that's always been their ambition. And government has attempted to stop some of that through regulation. The income tax was created as sort of a response to the empires being created by wealth. And I guess even if you imagined yourself in control of billions of dollars, well, maybe it's not a good thing to do, because if I imagine myself in control of billions of dollars, I'm damn sure I wouldn't be using the money to merely control people in some sort of malicious sense. I'd certainly use the money to support ideas I thought were useful, but I would do it in an honest way. So, I mean, in that sense, it is troublesome that all these foundations are created by wealth. The talking heads, all these people are financed by wealth. It's not, individuals really aren't financing most organizations anymore, especially think tanks. Even something like the ACLU probably isn't financed much by independent money anymore. It's foundation money, and so their agenda is going to be sort of tied to that. And like even the creation of these foundations, you don't know what they're up to. A lot of them are staffed and run by the spawn of the privileged. I don't know what else to call them. The wealthy elite who don't really work for a living. They volunteer, or they get themselves appointed to some kind of position of control in one of these foundations or organizations or think tanks or whatever. Anyway, there's no real conspiracy here, in the sense that I don't think there's anything. I don't think they're accomplishing anything as a conspiracy. And then, there's just so much there's so much obvious ineptitude in what is done. I mean, when you think of the $1 trillion war, obviously it hasn't helped us with oil prices. It hasn't helped us in any way to be in Iraq. I mean, it doesn't make Iraq any more stable. It doesn't make Iran any more stable. It doesn't make Saudi Arabia any more stable. So it's not a winning strategy in terms of controlling oil. If anything, it would be the opposite. You would almost think it was a conspiracy by people who had oil properties not in the Middle East, as their oil would be worth more as Middle Eastern oil becomes less and less reliable. So anyway, I'm not saying there isn't some crap going on, behind closed doors, but you also have to consider that, it's very hard to run a conspiracy. these people all have servants and butlers, and there's waiters and waitresses and all kinds of people, and it's, you know, very hard to conduct all this business in secret, you know, without something getting out, without somebody hearing something. I mean, if they're having some sort of Nazi-esque, you know, meetings to, you know, control and manipulate world population, it's probably going to leak out, you know. Even that Helmsley woman couldn't avoid, you know, when push came to shove, you know, there was lots of people willing to testify about what they overheard her say. So I just don't buy, you know, I'm not saying conspiracies aren't possible. I'm just saying at this scale, it's not likely, just because there's just too many eyes and ears. So anyway, this North American Union thing, I mean, this Security and Prosperity Partnership, yeah, it's not law, it's just a policy position paper type thing. And so certainly the executive branch can do certain things, but they still have to be publicly done. I mean, it's not like they're done in secret. And you know, the fact is that there's a whole bunch of people who have an interest in maintaining this whole, you know, commerce thing going through Mexico. The numbers are something like $926 billion worth of trade between Mexico and Canada with the United States. So, you know, I'm talking almost $1 trillion in trade every year. You know, and then the whole thing with NAFTA and everything else, I mean, it's obviously businesses like it. They're also importing Chinese goods through Mexico. So there's all kinds of incentive to create some sort of infrastructure network to get goods, you know, from the Mexican border to some more centrally located position in North America, you know, in the United States, for distribution to the rest of the country. And instead of, you know, obviously there's an incentive for business to, you know, do that as cheaply as possible. So if they can eventually get Mexican drivers to the center of the country before they have to switch to an American truck driver, that's to their advantage, you know, business-wise. And, you know, so that's the, you know, I don't think there's no momentum in the country. People don't like what's happening. And it's just a weird battle that's going on between conservatives now, really. It's one branch of the Republican Party fighting the other branch of the Republican Party, essentially. I mean, it's essentially the racist branch, to put an unkind label on it, fighting the greedy, you know, business whore branch of the Republican Party, because that's the only incentive here is money, and you know, to do all this commerce. And the only, I mean, the scariest part of this idea of a one world government, or the idea of a unified American continent, you know, economic continent, is the fact that, yeah, there would be some degrading of our culture as it blended with the South American cultures. I think most people are fairly comfortable with Canada, but even that, there's a lot of, you know, they'll call them socialists up in Canada because of their policy on medicine. And, you know, there's a lot of things that, you know, I don't think the Canadians would necessarily like having to all of a sudden foot part of the bill for continental defense, you know, and all that kind of stuff. So, I mean, there's reasons why the Canadians wouldn't want to join the Americans, and there's reason why the Americans aren't going to want to join the Mexicans and, you know, the South Americans. And so none of this is going to happen tomorrow. I mean, like I said, a highway just is a matter of practical, as long as, you know, people have voted for this stupid NAFTA thing. We've had a choice to vote against candidates who supported it, and people haven't. And so we have it. And so if you're going to have the stupid policy of this open trade, it only makes sense to have efficient highways to move those trucks across. So that part of it, I don't see that necessarily as a conspiracy. It's just part of a continuation of this economic exploitation, and that's all it is. It's an exploitation of the cheap labor, and that's why we're not going to fix the problem, is because there's too many people dependent on that cheap labor, and then on the other side there's too many people, I suppose, sympathetic to the idea of immigration, because we do have a melting pot culture, so there's a lot of people in this melting pot who aren't particularly fixed to any kind of racial purity or anything, so they're really not going to find it offensive.
The language thing is who knows where that would go, because yeah, that's a bothersome. I can't see Americans having everything in both languages and accepting that as the American